I never thought I'd write something like this. In fact, I don't even know where to begin. All I know is nothing I've experienced before, no expedition, no documentary in tropical forests, no skydiving or cave diving. Nothing compares to what happened in that ice cave. It was the most horrifying experience of my life, and I know with a certainty heavier than any rock that I will never recover from it. I close my eyes and I still hear their screams. I still feel the freezing air burning my skin. I still see those eyes. But I need to tell this. I need to get it out even if no one believes me. So, I'll start from the beginning. It was supposed to be just another job. Just another expedition. 5 people? A cave newly revealed by the melting of a glacier in the interior of Iceland. I was there as the photographer and documentarian to record Dr. Helena's team, a famous glaciologist who had already led expeditions across the entire Arctic. There was also Isabella, the geologist who seemed to know every layer of rock in that mountain. Leo, a new assistant, full of energy. And Yuri, our local guide, always far too silent, always staring into nothing, as if he knew something we didn't. I thought it would be an incredible adventure. Beautiful shots, unique landscapes, a bit of risk, of course, but nothing we couldn't handle. But none of us were prepared for what we would find down there. Not me, especially not me. And to think it all started with that damn crack in the ice. Everyone was excited. The discovery of that cave had electrified the team. It was a new formation, revealed by the accelerated melting of the glacier, a crystalline ice tunnel that no one had ever set foot in before. Dr. Helena could barely contain her excitement. Her eyes sparkled like the flashes from my camera as she talked about how this could represent a huge breakthrough for science. We might find fossils preserved for millennia, she said while adjusting the equipment. Extinct life forms, or even ancient bacteria, Isabella agreed, mentally calculating the age of the ice layers, while Leo, with that youthful excitement, kept rambling about the possibility of finding an entire frozen animal. Just imagine, guys, a mammoth, or, I don't know, a cave wolf. He laughed, his voice echoing off the icy walls. I was excited too. Photographing that place would be a masterpiece. The ice walls were bluish, translucent in some spots, as if light had been trapped there for centuries. The sound of our footsteps reverberated in soft echoes, broken only by the heavy breathing of those carrying too much equipment. Only Yuri. He walked a bit behind, bringing up the rear. From time to time he'd stop, look up at the cave ceiling, or press his gloved hand against the ice, feeling something only he seemed to sense. At one point, while Leo was going on about how we were making history, Yuri said in a low but firm tone, "Not everything here deserves to be found." The words fell sharply in the cold air, and no one answered right away. I let out a nervous chuckle, not quite sure if he was being serious, but when I looked at him, there was nothing playful in his expression. It was grave, heavy. Dr. Helena broke the silence with her typical professionalism. Of course, we'll be careful. We always are, and we moved on. But those words stuck in my mind. The farther we went, the colder it got. Even our specialized suits seemed insufficient. There was moisture, small ice stalactites dripping, droplets that froze again the moment they hit the ground. The air was dense, and the silence oppressive. That's when we found the first bones. Isabella saw them first, a pile near an uneven wall, half buried in the hardened snow. They looked like animal remains, maybe a polar bear, or a reindeer that long ago got lost in that frozen labyrinth. But one of them caught our attention. It didn't quite look like an animal, but it didn't look human either. It was too elongated with strange joints, as if nature had made a mistake. Helena was thrilled. She took photos, made quick measurements while Isabella theorized it could be an unknown species, maybe a hybrid, a missing link perhaps. Leo was speaking almost out of breath. Guys, imagine. What if we're the first to discover this? But Yuri... He just stood there staring at that bone as if he recognized it. He didn't say a word. He just adjusted his backpack on his shoulder and kept walking without looking back. And I followed him, but I couldn't stop myself from taking one last look at that misshapen fragment, half buried in the ice. Something was wrong there. Very wrong. But we didn't know yet. Not yet. We kept moving deeper into the cave, the beams of our flashlights cutting through the darkness, casting strange shadows on the ice walls. The air was getting thinner, and the cold felt like it was seeping through our pores, freezing our very souls. That's when we started finding more bones, this time from animals. But they weren't fossilized, nor perfectly preserved like we had expected. They were pieces. Torn parts, exposed fractures, bones shattered, splintered like twigs. Isabella was the first to say out loud what we were all thinking. This doesn't look like something that died trapped. I crouched down to photograph a skull, maybe from a reindeer, but it was crushed in a way that felt unnatural. It wasn't erosion, nor the wear of time. It was violence. It was hunted, Leo whispered, his voice sounding more like a thought escaping. Helena nodded as she examined one of the fractured clavicles. The marks are teeth, big ones. We all fell silent for a few seconds, staring at that grotesque pile. Then Leo, with a nervous laugh, broke the tension. But what kind of predator could hunt in here? He was right. There were no footprints, no signs of entry or exit for large animals. Besides, we were deep underground. Yuri stood a bit behind, silently observing as always. But this time he spoke. It wasn't a normal predator. We all turned to him. He adjusted his hood, took a deep breath, and in that calm, almost too calm voice said, "There's a legend, a creature, that dwells in the hidden caves beneath the ice. The ancients called it Wendigo." The word lingered in the air, like the mist of our own breaths. I felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold. But before he could continue, Helena raised her hand, impatient. "We're scientists. I respect local traditions, of course, but legends are just legends." She said that, but her voice wasn't as steady as before. Yuri kept his eyes fixed on her, and I realized he wasn't telling this to scare anyone. There was no tone of storytelling. It was a warning. He just replied, "Not everything ancient is just a legend." And then we heard it. A sound. Distant. A crack. Like ice breaking. Or maybe bones. We all froze, the five of us. Our flashlights searched the void ahead. But there was only more darkness. More ice. More silence. Until farther ahead, another sound. This time a dragging noise. Slow, heavy. Helena cleared her throat, trying to regain control. It's probably the ice shifting. These structures are unstable. But no one answered, because deep down we all felt the same thing. It wasn't the ice. It wasn't instability. It was something else, and it was closer than we wanted to believe. We kept going. I don't know if it was courage, or just that irrational stubbornness of someone who doesn't want to admit they've taken the wrong path. The ice creaked several more times, and the darkness seemed to gain weight as we went deeper into the cave. The air grew even colder, and the sound of our footsteps became muffled, as if the very environment wanted to silence us. Helena was walking ahead, determined, but the rest of the group wasn't talking anymore. Just the rhythmic sound of the flashlights trembling in our hands. And then, suddenly, something moved. Fast. In a dark corner between two ice formations, a shadow detached itself from the wall and shot across in front of us like lightning. I couldn't even process it. All I heard was the scream. Isabella's scream. She was pulled with an overwhelming force as if she were made of paper, disappearing into a side opening that none of us had seen. A narrow, jagged hole in the ice wall. Pulled with an overwhelming force as if she were made of paper, disappearing into a side opening that none of us had seen. A narrow, jagged hole in the ice wall. It all happened in seconds. But before it pulled her, the thing, it stopped. I swear on everything, it stopped and looked at us. A look that wasn't just from a hungry predator. It was from something that knew exactly what it was doing. The eyes were deep, black as the cave itself, and even in that darkness I saw the jutting bones, the torn flesh, the grotesquely long, misshapen limbs. And then, like an animal choosing its prey, it analyzed each of us, one by one. It looked at me, at Yuri, at Leo, at Helena, and then it chose Isabella. She was the smallest, the most fragile, and also the closest. There wasn't even time. A long skeletal arm grabbed her and pulled. Her scream echoed through the cave while we, paralyzed, could only watch her flashlight roll across the floor and go out. Then, only the muffled sound of her desperate struggle down there inside the hole. Until silence. Only the echo of her last scream, fading, vanishing like the flashlight's dying light. Helena ran to the edge, but Yuri grabbed her firmly. No! She turned to him furious, tears already beginning to freeze on her face. We have to go after her! Leo was shouting too, not knowing whether to cry or run. We can't just leave her there. But Yuri... He just shook his head with that expression I'll never forget. At this point, she's already dead. Helena broke free from him, even looked down at the hole, but there was no way. It was narrow, deep, and from down there, a sound began to rise. A dragging, heavy, distant, as if that thing was still down there, waiting. We stood there, paralyzed, not knowing what to do. I could feel my heart pounding against my chest, the sweat freezing on my skin, and a brutal certainty. We should never have come in here. Never. The silence that followed, Isabella's scream seemed to suffocate us more than the thin air itself. Helena was still kneeling near the hole, eyes wide open, her breath trembling. Leo was pacing back and forth, kicking the ice, cursing, saying it couldn't be that we had to go after her. We can't just leave her? He shouted, pointing his flashlight into the darkness of the hole. We need to do something. I couldn't even speak. I was just holding the camera, gripping it too tightly, without even knowing why. Helena stood up, staring at Yuri. So, you're just going to stand there? You're not going to help? Yuri stayed quiet for a second, looking at the hole as if measuring not just its depth, but the abyss inside it. Then he took a deep breath and spoke. The Wendigo, he began, with that low voice that somehow seemed to fill the whole cave, doesn't hunt just out of necessity. We stood there listening, too afraid to interrupt. It hunts because that's what it is. Hunting is what keeps it alive. Leo, irritated, snapped back, So what? If it took Isabella, maybe it's satisfied. Yuri slowly turned his head, his eyes heavy with the weight of someone who knows more than they'd like to. "No." He looked at each of us and continued, "Now, we're a threat. We invaded its territory. It will protect it. To the end." We swallowed hard. Helena crossed her arms, trying to hold on to some rationality. "So what are you saying, that it's going to come after us?" Yuri nodded without hesitation. "It won't stop at one prey. It will hunt until it finishes all of us, until there's nothing left, or until we either drive it away or kill it." Leo ran his hands over his face, desperate. "My God!" I, even without fully understanding what Yuri knew, could only ask, "So, what do we do?" Yuri looked around. The darkness of the tunnel seemed even thicker now, and he answered simple, cold. "Either we run, or we fight, but..." He tilted his head slightly, and added, "It already knows we're here, and it knows this place much better than we do." We stood there paralyzed, listening again to that sound. The dragging. Far away, or maybe not so far after all. And for the first time, even Helena couldn't respond with science or logic. She just stayed silent. And I could only think about Isabella's voice, fading, down there, in the depths of a hole from which no one would ever come back. The vote was over. The three of us, me, Yuri, and Leo, decided to leave. Helena didn't agree, but she had no choice. She just stayed silent, eyes fixed on the ground, chewing on the guilt even before swallowing the defeat. We turned our flashlights back, started walking. The cold felt heavier now. Or maybe it was the fear stuck to our skin like burning ice. The silence was broken only by our footsteps and short breaths. Until that sound. Again. The dry crack. The dragging, the growl. We all turned at the same time. And before we could even scream, it emerged from the darkness, a deformed, skeletal mass, pale, eyes hollow like bottomless pits. The Wendigo. Leo tried to lift his arms, screamed, but the creature lunged at him. In a second, those elongated fingers, or were they claws, tore through his neck. The blood sprayed hot into the freezing air. Helena screamed. Leo fell, his eyes wide open, his body trembling. Then just still. I couldn't move. I could only watch as Yuri lunged forward, pulling from his pocket a knife I didn't even know he had. He threw himself at the creature, driving the blade in with all his strength. The Wendigo let out a roar. Not of pain. Not of fear. Just rage. It tried to break free. But I don't know how. Maybe out of sheer desperation. The two of us jumped in too. I grabbed one of the creature's arms, while Yuri pushed the knife deeper and deeper. The Wendigo's skin was rough, cold, like old leather. It thrashed, twisted, until finally, it stopped. It went still. Collapsed on top of Leo's body. Helena was crying, unable to look. I fell to my knees, gasping, with the taste of blood in my mouth. I don't know if it was his or mine. Yuri stood staring at the fallen creature and whispered. It wasn't the only one. I didn't even understand at first, until we heard it. More sounds, more cracks, more dragging, and then we saw 3, 4, maybe more. Other Wendigos, the hollow eyes, the open mouths. Ready, run! Yuri shouted, and we ran. We ran without looking back, without thinking, just hearing the claws scraping against the walls, the sound of monstrous bodies closing in, and as if the cave itself wanted to swallow us. The walls started collapsing. The ice gave way, rocks and slabs crashing down. The entrance vanished in an avalanche of rock and ice. The three of us fell out the other side, rolling in the cold snow, our breath faltering, our bodies shaking, but alive, just the three of us. Helena, her face covered in tears and blood, Yuri with the knife still in his hand, like an extension of his own arm, and me, with the camera, but with no desire to ever use it again. I never saw Yuri again, or Helena. For a while we exchanged messages, tried to pretend it was just a failed expedition, an accident, but it wasn't. It never was. Today I'm writing this just to try to lift some of the weight, but I know it won't help. The image of Leo, of Isabella, of the Wendigo, it won't leave my mind. And sometimes when I close my eyes, I still hear the cracks, the dragging, and I wonder, did they stay there? Or did they come out? With us?